21 teams participated in this week's NASCAR Next Gen test at the Charlotte Roval, by far the largest Next Gen test to date, and several concerns have popped up. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. It's been a busy week. Today we're talking all about the recent two-day Next Gen test at the Charlotte Roval, the concerns that teams have now, the things NASCAR says they are doing to try and alleviate some of those concerns. We're going to talk about all of that and much more today. But first, this episode is sponsored by my friends at Work Pro Tools. You've probably seen the Work Pro Tools logo on the DGM Xfinity cars, like Josh Williams' number 92. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and Work Pro Tools has teamed up with the National Breast Cancer Foundation to run special pink paint schemes on track all this month. You'll see this car on track next this Saturday at Texas Motor Speedway. Also, with this partnership, Work Pro is selling a special line of pink tools and toolkits. You can get these from Work Pro's Amazon store. That link is down in the description. Look at how they stand out. Each purchase of pink Work Pro tools will result in a donation to the National Breast Cancer Foundation. So be sure to click that link down below and check out all of the great products Work Pro Tools has to offer, and pay special attention to their new special line of pink tools and tool sets. Now, we've got a lot to get to today. We're going to focus on the Next Gen, but before I get to my reaction and all the highlights from the most recent Next Gen test at the Roval, some silly season news this morning. John Hunter Nemechek confirmed that he will return to Kyle Busch Motorsports next year in the 4 truck. He released this pretty cool little hype video, which I was surprised to hear myself featured in it. John Hunter Nemechek revealed that he will be driving for Kyle Busch.
So my question for him was...
Whoever I have to thank for that, that's really awesome. Really appreciate the little subtle shout out in the video. I'm happy for John Hunter Nemechek. 5 wins this season in 20 starts. He's the clear championship frontrunner. He'll return next season. I know many fans may be wondering, why wouldn't John Hunter Nemechek move up to the Xfinity Series, especially since it seems like Joe Gibbs Racing has a couple of vacancies. It all comes down to sponsorship, and I'll bet Mobil 1 and some of those main partners over at KBM, they wanted to see John Hunter Nemechek stay in that truck, continue to contend for wins on a weekly basis. So it makes sense. I'm all for it. Keep dominating the truck series, keep hunting for trophies, continue to build a name and a brand for yourself. I think John Hunter Nemechek's in a decent spot. We forget how young John Hunter Nemechek is. He's like my age. I think he turned 24 this year, so he's still very young. No need to rush him through the ranks. If sponsorship is there for him to go dominate trucks for another season, I say go do it. But on the Xfinity Series note, I saw Bob Pockrass and a few others now are reporting rumors that Brandon Jones and Ty Gibbs are the front runners to land full-time Joe Gibbs Xfinity Series rides next season. Not too shocking. What is a little shocking is the rumor that Joe Gibbs Racing is considering shrinking their operation from 4 full-time Xfinity cars down to 3. They'd have Brandon Jones, Ty Gibbs, and then that third car would be for, Kyle Busch, Hamlin, a revolving door of drivers, probably John Hunter Nemechek for a few starts. We know Daniel Hemrick and Harrison Burton are leaving the team this offseason, so we'll just have to wait and see what Joe Gibbs Racing's 2022 Xfinity Series lineup ends up looking like. What we do know now is that John Hunter Nemechek will stay in the Camping World Truck Series for another season and will contend for a championship there. Now, let's talk Next Gen. This week, Monday and Tuesday, was the biggest NASCAR Next Gen test to date. 21 cars rolled into Charlotte, made laps around the Roval. Among them, newer teams like GMS Racing and Team Hezeberg, Starcom, and even Chip Ganassi were there, although I think that Ganassi car is really a Trackhouse car at this point. Notably, Front Row Motorsports, which we talked about last week, was not there, and Live Fast Motorsports also did not attend this test. I saw a report that they don't have a car fully assembled yet, so we'll probably see them at the next one. But a bunch of teams made laps, a bunch of drivers made laps, many drivers made laps in the Next Gen for the first time, so we'll hear what some of the drivers had to say after testing. Credit to NASCAR though, this test was very open to the public. In fact, I believe fans who had tickets for Sunday's Charlotte Roval, real race, playoff race, could attend the Next Gen test for free. And you saw some fans scattered through the grandstands throughout Monday and Tuesday. So NASCAR made this test very public. They live streamed the entirety of the 2-day test on their YouTube channel. They had over 15-20 hours of content streamed live Monday and Tuesday. So I do want to give NASCAR a lot of credit. They wanted to give fans a clear look at the new car, and they did just that. So appreciate the transparency, appreciate the coverage from NASCAR. Now, of course, it was not the smoothest test in the world. Over the course of the 2 days, there were several notable issues that seemed to crop up repeatedly. We'll address those in a moment, because if you ask me, there are really 3 major concerns I still have with the Next Gen car. Some of them were kind of answered this week, others still need to be answered in future tests. But we'll talk about those 3 big concerns in just a moment. First though, Look at these paint schemes, y'all. We've talked so much about door number placement. Now, for the first time, we saw a lot of race cars all in one place, all on track together, with door numbers slid forward. And some looked better than others, let's just say that. The Trackhouse number 99, to me, stole the show. Not only did they, I think, utilize the extra space on the door perfectly to feature the Trackhouse logo, I think that looks really, really sharp, but the chrome decals, chrome numbers. NASCAR confirmed this week that chrome numbers and decals will be allowed with some limitations next season, which is a notable change in tune from recent years. So Trackhouse taking full advantage of it. I think Wood Brothers as well had kind of a reflective gold number 21, but that Trackhouse car, that looks sharp. I thought GMS Racing's number 94 with Ty Dillon behind the wheel looks pretty sharp. That looked pretty good. Richard Petty Motorsports, actually, I thought they did the forward slid number. They almost did it to perfection. The number's still pretty big. It's not warped. It's not so far forward. It's up on the fender. That looks pretty good. Not every team was perfect. I didn't love the look of this colleague car. I mean, a lot of space there for the leaf filter logo, but that 16 is right up against the wheel well. I don't love that. Same issue sort of with this Chip Ganassi number 42. The 2311 racing car looked really cool, but the number was way too small. The decals, the logos on the side were way too small. They were almost illegible. Obviously, this is not what their car is going to look like on track next season. It looked kind of cool, kind of sharp for a test car, but, you know, not perfect. Overall, after seeing a lot of these paint schemes the last couple days, I'm a little more optimistic than I was a few weeks ago about NASCAR's decision to move the door numbers forward next season, because we've seen now a few teams, at least in my opinion, do a very good job of displaying them. But like I just pointed out, there are some teams that insist on moving the door number so far forward that it doesn't quite work for me. So hopefully those teams get with the program and do what Trackhouse, what Petty are doing, because those cars looked really, really good this week, at least in my opinion. Leave a comment down below. Which paint schemes do you think looked the best, or which ones absolutely offended your sensibilities? Anyway, I wanted to get the fun paint scheme stuff out of the way first. Now let's get into the nitty gritty. Like I said, I think there are three big concerns still remaining with the next gen car. Let's start with number one, probably the biggest concern that most drivers have been voicing in recent weeks, and that is the heat inside the cockpit. Especially since that Daytona test a few weeks ago, we've heard many drivers voice concerns over the actual air temperatures inside the race car. NASCAR race cars get hot. We've known this for a long time. TV's been putting thermometers inside of cars for years now. Whoa, 130, 140 degrees. Wow, drivers are losing 10 pounds of sweat during a race. But from what some drivers were saying, the heat inside the next gen was even worse, to the point that it was a legitimate concern. I talked to Christopher Bell earlier this week, and the heat inside the car was the number one concern he had with the next gen. He had some others, but the heat was the first thing he said. You'll see that full interview tomorrow, actually. So NASCAR needed to address the heat, and I will give NASCAR credit. It sounds like NASCAR and the teams made some serious progress yesterday, or Monday and Tuesday, I should say. Granted, it wasn't particularly hot in Charlotte the last couple days, but NASCAR and the teams tried a couple different ideas out. They put little spaces, little openings, little vents almost in the front windshield. They put some vertical slits in the back windshield on some cars to kind of help air flow through the cockpit past the driver and everything. On some cars, it appeared as though there were little openings on the back bumper, actually, like on the very back of the car as well, that were supposed to help with airflow throughout the cockpit. And actually some cars, notably, I think one per manufacturer, the 17 car for Ford, the 19 car for Toyota, and I think the 48 Chevy, were all testing shorter exhaust pipes. You know, pipes that don't run the entire length of the cockpit so that they're going completely underneath the driver all the way through. No, they stopped a little shorter, so maybe they're not heating up the floorboards quite as much. All of these combined, or maybe some more than others, seem to have some positive effects. A few drivers spoke to the media after the test, and both Tyler Reddick and Alex Bowman said that they believe the slits and vents in the windshields especially did help cool off the inside of the car a little bit. And Tyler Reddick even went as far as to say that he felt a little cold inside of the car at one point. So coming into this week, I think heat was the number one concern with the next gen car, but it sounds like NASCAR and the teams have found some plausible solutions to the heat issue, or at least something that helps alleviate it a little bit. You're never going to make the inside of these cars cool. NASCAR cars are always going to be hot, but hopefully less hot than they were at that Daytona test a few weeks ago. So some good progress being made there, it sounds like. Now, the second biggest concern facing teams this weekend, the steering rack. Steering problems plagued pretty much every driver, every car, every manufacturer at this test. The next gen uses a rack and pinion steering system, and NASCAR VP of Racing Innovation John John Probst addressed the actual issue that teams seem to be facing, he attributed many of the problems to set screws backing out. Corey LaJoie was one of the drivers who explained what it felt like when these problems arose. The steering, the car just got really wobbly. I read this quote from Alex Bowman in a Racer.com article. He said, "When the steering issues pop up, it's a bit of a nightmare. We've had some laps without steering issues, and I think it drives great. And then obviously we've been working through trying to dial in the issues we've had." Like I said, from what I can tell, every single car, driver, team in the field dealt with a very, very similar issues. But again, kind of like the heat situation, there's reason to be optimistic. It sounds like they made some progress from day one to day two. Like, I was reading an article from The Athletic where Ryan Blaney was talking about on day one, like halfway into their first lap, he'd start feeling the steering get all wobbly and feel vibration. It would start coming apart. So they bring it in and try different things and whatnot. But then by day two, they tried something completely different day two, and Blaney said that the overnight changes they made led to the steering issues popping up less frequently on Tuesday. They were still there, it sounds like, so not a perfect clean fix, but maybe some progress being made there. I think now that the heat issue seems to have some solutions, I'd almost vault the steering issues now to the number one spot, the number one issue. Heat's probably number 2 or 3 now. So NASCAR and the teams are gonna have to continue to work on these steering issues. We've heard drivers complain about sometimes twitchy or awkward steering for over a year now, really since the beginning of these next-gen tests, especially at ovals. We've heard drivers complain here and there about the way the steering feels. So that's something NASCAR is absolutely gonna have to address and work on, but they sounded optimistic. Again, NASCAR VP John Probst said that NASCAR is very comfortable with the current next-gen car timeline as far as having it ready for next February's LA Clash. And then the third big concern, and this goes back to those rumors around that Talladega crash test from months ago, but the next gen's ability to absorb impacts. That is still somewhat of a concern, but NASCAR has announced a few changes that they're making to the car to hopefully help with that. I'm not entirely sure if they had these changes implemented for this test or if it will be for the next test here in about a month, but NASCAR is planning to swap out some of the rear and front clips so that rather than sort of snapping on impact, they will bend a little bit more, give a little more consistently, slowly, I don't know what the right word is. Basically, the idea is that they're replacing these parts with new parts, new versions of the parts that will absorb more energy when the car impacts, the outside wall. So that will take more of that energy away from the driver, so the driver's not feeling it as badly. The next gen chassis is strong, maybe strong to a fault. It's very stiff, it's heavily reinforced, so that's good in a lot of ways, but it's bad potentially when it comes to absorbing the initial impact of hitting another car or the wall, which is where some of these new changes will hopefully alleviate any level of concerns drivers may still have about the next gen car's safety. NASCAR's John Probst did say that in the last couple months at least, NASCAR has been in regular communication with race teams about the next gen safety and all the development going on that front. So I have that as the third big concern because I think at this point, driver safety is obviously extremely important, but I think NASCAR and the next gen are in a pretty decent spot when it comes to driver safety. So I have that as the third concern, but the biggest two are definitely the heat and the steering system, with probably the steering system now being number one. It's important to remember that this is an all new car. This isn't like, when NASCAR swapped from the Gen 4 to the car tomorrow in 2007, or when the Gen 6 was introduced in 2013. This is not the same thing. This is a complete rebuilding, a reimagining of what a NASCAR stock car race car looks like, feels like, races like, is built. This is a complete top to bottom change. So with that in mind, I think I'm willing to give NASCAR a little more grace next year. I think next season, we're going to see some changes throughout the year. There will be small rule changes, small part changes, some edits here and there for different types of tracks. I'd almost guarantee it at this point. And some teams will probably be frustrated by that. Some fans will probably be frustrated by that. But with everything being considered that this is a brand new race car, I'm gonna give NASCAR sort of a grace period here. The car has to be great. The car can't be unsafe. The car can't be a complete mess on day one. But if there are a few little tweaks here and there that need to be made, next May, next July, next September, I'll allow it next season because this is an all new, completely different project. I think it's important for fans to sort of feel the same way. Heck, this year with the Gen 6, a car that NASCAR has been running for 7-8 years now, they've still made changes mid-season with the Super Speedway rules package especially. They're still making changes even with cars they fully understand. So next year with a brand new car that nobody fully understands yet, I would expect some edits to be made throughout the course of the season. So just prepare yourselves for that, and I don't think fans should overreact to those changes if and when they come up. up. But anyway, one more big thing I want to talk about in this video. A lot of fans I saw earlier this week were reacting very strongly to a few reports regarding the horsepower and spoiler height numbers that NASCAR was testing at the Roval this weekend. NASCAR confirmed that the cars that were testing at the Roval this week were generating 670 horsepower and were running roughly 4-inch tall spoilers. And as far as next year is concerned, NASCAR said this week that the intermediate tracks will feature 550 horsepower, 8-inch spoilers, so low horsepower, high downforce. Meanwhile, the short tracks and road courses will feature that 670 horsepower and 4-inch spoiler. So not too different from what we have today. Obviously today at the short tracks and road courses we have 750 horsepower, but 670, not a huge change in that front. But those numbers got a lot of fans feeling flustered. And I get it. A lot has been made in recent years about horsepower and the size of the spoiler, the giant ass spoilers, you know. And those numbers definitely mean something. Those numbers are definitely important, but they don't tell the full story. So I would caution fans, in fact, I would plead with fans at this point to not solely focus in on the horsepower numbers. Those numbers are important, they do matter, they will somewhat affect how the cars drive, how the cars race, but like I said a moment ago, the next gen is a completely different race car built from the ground up. The wheels are bigger, lower profile tires, completely different steering mechanism, the rear diffuser to help hopefully with dirty air. The sides of the car are symmetrical, so they'll be leaning on less side force than they have in recent years. The cars are going to drive completely different. Everything we've heard from drivers to this point, they're saying that the next gen is going to be harder to drive at intermediate tracks. In some cases, they're saying it's going to be harder to drive because it's kind of unpredictable and because there's issues with the steering. So in some cases, it's maybe not a good thing, but the point is I do not believe the next gen is going to handle exactly like the Gen 6 does at the intermediates, even with 550 horsepower. I understand a lot of fans are disappointed. They want the 900 horsepower, the glory days, if you will, of big horsepower, big motors once again. NASCAR continues to reiterate that they believe new potential manufacturers want 550 horsepower. We obviously haven't seen any new manufacturers enter the sport. There's rumblings every year, but nothing ever becomes concrete. Maybe in the coming years with the next gen, that will finally happen. If it doesn't, obviously that's a black eye to NASCAR, but I think there's a very real possibility new manufacturers, or at least a new manufacturer, joins in the coming years. But anyway, that's all besides the point. I understand why fans are frustrated that 550 horsepower is now the norm at many of the bigger tracks. But horsepower is not everything. These cars are going to handle differently. It's too early to say what the racing next year at Kansas or Charlotte or Texas will look like. You know, to be fair, NASCAR is sending some mixed signals because they're adding banking to Atlanta, so it's clear that they're trying to create some form of super speedway, pack racing at some of the intermediate tracks, but I'm not convinced, honestly, that the next gen is going to result in that style of racing, even at higher banked Atlanta. So it's all a huge unknown. The point is, don't focus in on the 550 horsepower. Look at all of the other new, unique, defining characteristics of the next gen and understand that from the driver's seat, these cars are going to feel differently, they're going to drive differently than the Gen 6 does now. So I understand being disappointed by less horsepower, but horsepower is certainly not everything. You can see really competitive, really edgy racing with 550 horsepower if the race cars are dialed in the exact right way. So I wouldn't get too up in arms about it. I saw a lot of fans frustrated, but it's just a number, and the number itself does not tell the full story. There's probably so much more to talk about regarding the next gen, but I don't think I'm the right guy to talk about it. You know, Larry McReynolds was all over NASCAR's YouTube channel this week, sharing tidbits, talking about specific elements of the next gen car. He's certainly more qualified to talk about that than I am. Or, you know, Bozy on Twitter, who's an IMSA mechanic, he knows the next gen. He's laid out some pretty in-depth Twitter threads that you should check out if you want to get into the real nitty-gritty regarding certain elements of the next gen. But in a high-level sense, I've outlined my big concerns. I think the big concerns that many drivers and teams share as well. Let me know what you think of the next gen. The next gen test will be in about a month, November 17th and 18th at Charlotte, the Oval. A test scheduled for Phoenix in December, Daytona in January, preseason thunder kind of coming back. And also some interesting news that came out this week. They'll be testing at Bowman Gray at some point this offseason to prepare for the LA Clash race, apparently. They're also testing at a dirt track, and I think they're hoping to test at the new Atlanta track at some point fairly soon. So we'll see how that goes, but plenty more next gen testing to come before 2022 officially rolls around, the season officially rolls around. But we've outlined the Charlotte Roval test. This could be the last road course test for a while. Sounds like when it comes to road racing, the next gen's in a decent place. But leave a comment down below. What do you think of the next gen? What do you think of the paint schemes? Share your thoughts down below. I always look forward to reading them. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. We talk NASCAR pretty much every day. It's been a very busy week here at Out of the Groove. And as always, a big thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters. Couldn't do this show without your continued support every single month. I greatly appreciate it. Thanks again to Work Pro Tools for sponsoring this episode. Check out their their Amazon store down in the description below. That's gonna do it. Got a Christopher Bell interview coming out tomorrow. Pretty interesting stuff. I hope you guys are excited for that. I know I'm excited to share it with you. I'll see you in the next video, y'all. Have a great rest of your day. Take it easy.